Imagine this. You wake up cold. Not a bit chilly cold, but the kind that seeps into your bones. The kind that stone floors and damp air create after 1,000 sleepless nights. There is no bed beneath you, no mattress, just straw, rough, uneven, smelling of dust and sweat. You open your eyes above you, wooden beams blackened by smoke, a flickering torch on the wall, shadows that move even when nothing else does. Somewhere nearby, a man coughs. Another whispers a prayer. Someone is quietly crying. You are not in your world. You are in the Middle Ages. And worse than that, you are not just here. You are going on a crusade. You didn't sign up online. You didn't read the terms and conditions. You didn't get a chance to change your mind. You already swore the oath. The call? It begins with words. Always words. In 1095, crowds gathered in a place called Clermont. Peasants, knights, merchants, beggars, people who had never travelled more than a few kilometres from their homes. They came out of curiosity. They left changed forever. On a raised platform stood Pope Urban II. No microphone, no speakers, just a human voice carrying across a sea of faces. He spoke about Jerusalem, about the Holy Sepulchre, about Christian lands defiled by infidels. But most importantly, he spoke about forgiveness. If you go, he said, your sins will be erased. All of them. Murder, theft, violence, everything washed clean in blood and dust, and the crowd exploded. Deus vult! God wills it. This wasn't a polite agreement. It was a roar, a wave, a scream of people who finally felt chosen. For a medieval person, this was irresistible. Life was short, painful, unfair. Most people lived in debt, hunger, and fear of hell. And now, suddenly, heaven was offering a shortcut. Here's the myth. The Crusades were fought by noble knights in shining armour. Here's the reality. Most crusaders were not knights. They were farmers who had never held a sword. Teenagers chasing adventure. Old men chasing redemption. Criminals escaping punishment. Second and third sons with no inheritance. And people who genuinely believed the world was ending. Yes, knights came too. But even they weren't rich heroes. Armour was expensive. Horses were fragile. Weapons broke. Many sold everything they owned just to afford the journey. Land, homes, tools. Some borrowed money from monasteries or Jewish lenders. Debts that would haunt their families for generations. Once you took the cross, there was no turning back. People literally sewed a cloth cross onto their clothes. That's where the word crusader comes from. You were marked. This is where modern logic collapses. There was no centralized recruitment, no standard equipment, no supply system. No one really knew how far Jerusalem was. Some thought it would take a few weeks. It would take years. There were no accurate maps, no GPS, no shared language, no universal currency. Entire groups marched without understanding where they were going, only that they were following God's road. And once you started walking, stopping felt like betraying heaven itself. Picture the road, thousands of people moving slowly across Europe, men, women, children, wagons, livestock, makeshift weapons. They sleep in fields, in barns, in forests. Food runs out quickly. At first, locals welcome them. They bring bread, water, sometimes wine. They pray together. But kindness has limits. A crusading army eats everything in its path. Crops, livestock, stored grain, firewood. Soon villages begin to resist. Fights break out. Looting becomes normal. Hunger turns holy warriors into desperate thieves. And this is still Europe. The crusade hasn't even reached the real enemy yet. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Many crusaders believed God would protect them from everything. Disease, starvation, weather, steel. God did not. People died constantly, from dysentery, from infected wounds, from exhaustion, from heat during the day, and freezing cold at night. There were no doctors, only priests, and prayer does not close wounds. Every corpse left on the road was a reminder. Holiness does not make you immortal. And yet, the march continued, because turning back meant admitting doubt, and doubt was more terrifying than death. By the time Crusaders reached the Byzantine Empire, they were no longer welcomed pilgrims, they were a problem. The emperor saw them as dangerous, undisciplined, unpredictable. Thousands of armed foreigners passing through his land, eating, stealing, fighting. So he rushed them across his territory as fast as possible. Get them out, send them east. Let someone else deal with them. Across the sea waited something no European peasant had ever seen, cities larger than anything in the West, walls that looked impossible to breach, enemies who were organized, experienced, and very much real. The crusade was no longer an idea, it was a war. The first real battle never looks the way people imagine it. There are no heroic speeches, no perfect formations, no music swelling in the background. There is noise, too much noise. Metal crashing against metal. Horses screaming. Men shouting in languages you don't understand. Dust filling your mouth, your eyes, your lungs. This is where faith meets reality. And reality hits hard. The Crusaders expected monsters. They were told stories of savage barbarians, godless beasts, enemies who would flee at the sight of Christian steel. Instead, they met professional soldiers. The Seljuk Turks were fast, disciplined, and terrifyingly effective. Their cavalry moved like a storm, appearing, striking, disappearing before heavy European knights could even react. Arrows fell from the sky like rain. Crusaders had never faced this kind of warfare. Their armor was heavy, their movements slow, their formations rigid. Panic spread faster than orders. Men dropped shields to run, others froze in place, unable to understand how they were losing to an enemy they could barely see. This was not a holy test. This was slaughter. If battle was chaos, siege was torture. Cities in the Middle East were built to endure. Thick walls, strong gates, towers designed for defense, not decoration. Crusaders didn't have enough siege engines. They didn't have enough food. They didn't have enough water. What they did have was time. And time kills. Weeks turned into months. The sun burned during the day. The cold crept in at night. Bodies weakened. Disease spread. Water sources were poisoned or cut off. Horses died first, then were eaten. Leather belts were boiled to extract something, anything, that might keep a man alive another day. There are chronicles that describe something unthinkable. Cannibalism, not as madness, not as savagery, but as survival. When faith is starving, it will consume itself. Antioch was the first true test. A massive city, ancient, nearly impregnable. The Crusaders besieged it for months, starving outside while the defenders starved inside. Victory didn't come through strength, it came through betrayal. A guard opened a gate, and once the walls were breached, everything collapsed. What followed was not justice, not mercy, not holiness, it was massacre. Men were cut down in the streets, houses looted, blood flowed into gutters. And then, just days later, the Crusaders themselves were besieged inside the city by a Muslim relief army. They were trapped, starving, surrounded, exhausted. This should have been the end. Instead, something strange happened. A monk claimed to have found the Holy Lance, the spear that pierced Christ's side. True or not, it changed everything. Suddenly, broken men believed they were chosen again. They marched out of Antioch to face an army larger than their own, and against all logic, they won, not because of miracles, but because their enemies were divided, cautious and unprepared for such desperation. To the Crusaders, this victory confirmed everything. God was still with them. Nothing could stop them now. The road to Jerusalem was quieter. Not because it was safer, but because there were fewer people left. Most had died, deserted, collapsed along the way. Those who remained were not the same people who had left Europe. They were thinner, harder, emptier. Their faith had been sharpened by horror. And when they finally saw it, the city on the horizon, some fell to their knees and wept. Years of walking, years of suffering, years of death, Jerusalem! In 1099, the Crusaders breached Jerusalem. What happened next is one of the darkest chapters in medieval history. Contemporary sources, both Christian and Muslim, describe streets filled with corpses. Blood said to reach the ankles. Men, women and children killed without distinction. Mosques, synagogues, homes, no mercy. The Crusaders believed this was God's will. From their perspective, this was purification. From history's perspective, it was a massacre. When it was over, the survivors walked barefoot to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, praying, crying, thanking God. The contradiction is unbearable. The crusade succeeded. Jerusalem was taken, but Europe did not become holier. The Middle East did not become peaceful, and God did not speak again. Instead, the Crusades opened centuries of war, hatred, and misunderstanding that still echo today. For the people who went, there was no going back to who they were. Some stayed and became lords of foreign lands. Some returned home broken, unable to explain what they had done. Many never returned at all. They went seeking salvation. They found something else entirely. So now, ask yourself, if you were there, if you stood in that crowd in 1095, if you heard the call, would you have taken the cross? Because once you do, the road only goes forward. The war ends, at least that's what people expect. The city is taken, the prayers are said, the crosses are kissed, the promise is fulfilled. So what now? Now comes the hardest part, living with it. When Crusaders imagine the end of their journey, they see triumph, trumpets, crowds, a hero's welcome. Reality is different. Those who survive and return to Europe don't come back as legends. They come back as strangers. Years have passed. Fathers return to find their children grown or dead. Wives have remarried. Land has been taken. Debts have multiplied. Some Crusaders arrive home with nothing but scars and stories no one wants to hear. They don't look holy. They look broken. And people notice. Medieval people believed deeply in sin, and Crusaders were told their sins were forgiven. But forgiveness on paper doesn't erase memory. They remember the sieges, the hunger, the screams, the faces. They remember doing things they never imagined themselves capable of. Killing wasn't the hardest part. It was killing without knowing who deserved it. There was no clear line between enemy and civilian, no clean battlefield, no safe distance, just orders, fear, and survival. Many returned deeply religious, not out of peace, but out of terror. They prayed more, donated more, joined monasteries, trying to silence what followed them home. Not everyone returned. Some stayed in the east. They became lords of newly created Crusader states, Jerusalem, Antioch, Tripoli, Edessa. On paper, they were rulers. In reality, they were foreigners surrounded by hostile land. They married local women, learned new languages, adapted customs. Slowly, they stopped being fully European. And yet, they were never truly local either. They lived in between worlds, always defending, always at war. These states survived not because they were strong, but because their enemies were divided. Once unity returned, their fate was sealed. This is the part people forget. The First Crusade didn't close a chapter. It opened a book. More crusades followed. Second, third, fourth, Children's Crusade, Northern Crusades. Political crusades disguised as holy ones. The idea was too powerful to die. The cross became a symbol that could be reused again and again to justify war, conquest, and violence. And each time the promise was the same. This one will be different. It never was. History likes clean stories. Good versus evil. Faith versus disbelief. Heroes and villains. The Crusades refused to fit. They were fueled by belief, genuine belief. They were driven by suffering, real suffering. And they caused horror. Undeniable horror. Both things are true at the same time. That's what makes them uncomfortable. You can't romanticize them without lying. You can't condemn everyone without simplifying. The Crusades were not monsters invading paradise. They were humans, desperate, convinced, afraid, hopeful, which makes it worse. Try this. Forget kings, forget popes, forget grand strategies. Imagine you are one person. A farmer, a blacksmith, a second son with no future. You live in a world where disease is random, death is common, and hell feels closer than tomorrow. And someone tells you, your suffering means something. Your pain can be redeemed. Your death will matter. Would you go? Not because you are cruel, but because you are human. The Crusades were not an accident. They were the result of a world where faith explained everything, and fear ruled daily life. A world without safety nets, without certainty, without second chances. And when such a world is given a purpose, people will walk to the edge of the earth for it, even if that road is paved with blood, because the mechanism never disappeared. Change the language, change the symbols, change the enemy. The structure remains, a promise of meaning, a division of us and them, a justification for violence. That's why the Crusades are not just medieval history. They are a warning. You take off the cross, you return home, but something inside you never comes back. And maybe that's the most honest legacy of the Crusades. Not glory, not victory, but the cost of believing too much and questioning too little.